That's the one where you go up and down to see, you know, right?
I just muted, sorry. There we go.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the States of
United States of America,
To
to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible,
liberty,
with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, so thank you all for joining in today. November 18th. Main point of the agenda is to have Colliers and anonymous room provide us with an update. So Chuck, your floor.
Yeah, I think Renee, in the interest of time, I'm going to pass it right to Rebecca and Mike to let them give us an update on what they've been working on and some of the options.
Yeah.
All right, you got that, Rebecca? Oh, there you go.
Yep. Can you guys see it?
Yes, we could see it.
Yep, we're good.
Okay. So following our last meeting, Chuck did a lot of work looking into the buildings themselves and the appropriateness of the facilities for some of what we had talked about in previous scenarios. And I think one thing stood out of Dodd really not being a good candidate as an elementary school, and I'll let Chuck address that as to why, but that kind of crossed out a couple of scenarios for us. So we decided to really hone in on the new pre-K to 6 school concept.
I can't hear anything.
So when we started to dig a little deeper on the new elementary school, just taking a look at the capacities that we're calculating for the existing buildings, which assume to be remaining, Doolittle, Highland, and Norton, we're looking at about 1,750 seats. So looking at a peak enrollment over the next 8-year period, which is what the state would look at when you go for a construction grant, you're short about 930 seats. So that would be quite a large new elementary school. But just to play out the scenario, this is exactly the redistricting boundaries that we showed you last time we met, last week. And again, the attempt here is really to minimize the need to add on to those remaining buildings, Doolittle, Highland, and Norton, and just see what would the size of the new school need to be if we were to go that route. So we actually played out the enrollment projections for that redistricting map that we just showed you. We're including pre-K entirely within the new school on that map. And let me just move you all. You can see that the peak enrollment in the new school would actually top 850 students. It would be keeping Doolittle right around 575, 580, Highland in the 700s, low 700s, and Norton right around 400 students. So it is a pretty good attempt at maximizing the use of those remaining buildings. It's not perfect. You could do a little more refinement, but regardless, you're still looking at a very large new elementary school with pre-K in it. So then we decided, sorry, Mike, did you want to add something?
Yeah, just really quick on that one. If we were to take pre-K out of there and the new school would just be K6, and following sort of the 8 years of the state grant, it would be anywhere between really 700 or so to a little over 700 students would be in there. So it would get it closer to the size of like Highland. If you were to try to think, just the student population in the building, it would be about that size.
For K6, Mike, and taking K out of Darcy.
If K, just to say, if pre-K did remain at Darcy and we put K6 in the school to have it on par with all the other elementary schools, Chuck, then looking ahead, you back 100 out, you're actually in the 650 to, mid 7 range of the school size. So, good. And some tweaks can be made there if you care about equity to kind of balance the size out with Highland so we don't have one much bigger than the other.
Yep.
Go ahead. Sorry, Rebecca.
That's okay. So that's one way to think about it. Then we decided just to also think about, well, what if you did add a little bit of capacity to one of the existing buildings, just to try to bring down that number that would need to be in the new school. And again, just based on Chuck's really quick analysis, a lot of your existing or the remaining sites would be somewhat challenging from an additions standpoint, but Norton seemed at least feasible for a small addition. So we brought up our assumption just by 50 students that Norton could be more of a 500 student school. And we played out a new concept for district boundaries around that. And it's very small changes to what you were looking at previously, but Norton does pick up some additional area out of Highland. We do sort of a little bit of a clockwise rotation here to change the enrollment balance a little bit. And we played out that scenario. And this, again, is including pre-K numbers in it. So it did bring the new school down to that 750 mark at its peak. Doolittle, about 550, brought Highland up a bit. So that's more at the 775. And Norton really getting up to that 500 number. So again, this could be fine-tuned, maybe to alleviate a little bit more out of Highland, but it does seem that a small addition to Norton did help to keep that new school building size down a little bit. If that were coupled with taking pre-K out of the new building, you would be looking at, you know, more of that 650 level. So this was just a couple of attempts to play around with what we're thinking about, and we wanted to hear a little bit more of a reaction to that school size and pre-K and its location, whether it really should be in that new school. Should we be looking for other alternatives for the pre-K, and just kind of hear from this group their thoughts on this.
I could jump in if I may, Jeff Solon, the superintendent here. I think, you know, the school size, even though it's on par with Highland, I mean, those are big schools,
Yep.
Very big elementary schools. Not that we can't do it or shouldn't do it. From building a school community perspective, it's higher than I think we would really want to go. But, you know, it's just that perspective. The other piece is kindergarten. I do need kindergarten students at Darcy if that building is going to remain open, because there's the continuum from birth to 3 through K that we really need a lot of transitional help with kids going from birth to 3 to pre-K to K. And we rely on having that under one roof for efficiency's sake, for the specialists, and for just having that talent pool from a staffing perspective under one roof is really tremendously beneficial for all of our kids. And it's obviously more cost effective to have the specialists under one roof. So those are a couple of quick reactions to these different scenarios.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing I would add is, you know, the idea of adding more students to Norton, you know, troubles me more from the bus route and the driveway and the parking capacity limitations at Norton. And I'm curious, instead of adding to Norton, if we added to Doolittle and redistricted around that to some extent, is that a possibility? Just kind of throwing that out there. I know it would make Doolittle even bigger, but at least Doolittle has some more options for parking and driveway improvements.
Yeah, I think, Vin, that's definitely an option. You and I kind of chatted a little bit, and I'm going to show later some of the maps, kind of just high level We took some aerials and superimposed the GIS maps and boundaries at a very high level, not taking into account that, but certainly I think Doolittle has some capability. We just have to dive into it a little bit further because of topography on the backside and then some, some restrictions on the front. But I think if we're talking, maybe what, 100 students, Rebecca, maybe?
Yeah, well, I guess it depends on if Darcy is in play or not.
Yeah.
And I guess that's one question is, would the preference be to get the pre-K into a building, pre-K to 6, rather than pulling K out of a building to keep
Yeah, I think, looking at this, pushing pre-K into a K facility, Highland being a bit of a preference because of the fact that a lot of the students that transition out of Darcy transition into Highland because that houses a program that supports those students. That's kind of the preference. And, I had been working on something that I shared with Vin, and yesterday I shared it with Andrew too, in a very rudimentary draft form that tried to identify all of the myriad of challenges that our school system is currently facing and our community is facing, with enrollment being one of those, elementary enrollment, the various facility issues, and have been working in my mind to consider what tackles all of these things. And I keep coming back to a 6 through 8 middle school. And I can share that document with you, but I'm curious on the enrollment side, Rebecca, pulling 6th grade out of all of the existing middle schools, or out of the existing elementary schools, what that does for flexibility at the existing buildings. I mean, I could kind of figure it out just by looking at our current enrollment in, let's say, 3rd grade or something, and building it out 3 years, and you figure out like that many kids, pulling them out of 6th grade in every building. What does that free up?
I'm gonna
I think we looked at that ourselves as well.
I figured you did. That's
Rebecca.
Yeah, I'm just gonna try to pull up what we looked at last week because I think it will get to some of those numbers. Give me 1 second here. Okay. So when you pull the 6th out, making no changes, or we were assuming that this would be a new middle school model of the 6-8. But we were also assuming a new elementary school in this scenario. So we were still consolidating Chapman and Darcy.
Yeah, Rebecca, I had about, I averaged 330 6th graders over the next 8 years. So that's almost, 80% of a elementary school, of one of your smaller schools. That's a significant amount of space. I think whether or not it would accommodate all of the future growth without the need to change any boundaries, and be able to focus then on whether it's pre-K at Highland or pre-K staying as a whole in one of the elementary schools. I just don't know if that aligns with we were kind of the key question is investing across the board in all those elementary schools. Would it be still looking at sort of keeping all the elementary schools intact?
I think in trying to take a look at this and project it out, my thinking was that, 4 years, it's going to take you 4 years to build a middle school, right? And in doing so, the enrollment will become clearer at that point. And you can't consolidate schools until that new school is built. You can't pull out. There's still, you don't have that luxury. So as we get closer to the construction and occupancy of the new 6 through 8 building, we'll have a clearer picture of our elementary enrollment, with the goal of, moving that 6 through 8 out, keeping pre-K 6 at Highland, and then saying, all right, where do we have flexibility to consolidate schools, close schools, redistrict to, at 4 years from now, with another enrollment study at that time, be able to better project out the next phase. And I know, like, for me, I would love to be able to plan out, all right, here's everything we're going to do over the next 15 years. But it's certainly subject to change pretty dramatically. I these days, I can't plan out my next 15 minutes with COVID and everything. I'm just trying to stay one step ahead. But looking at this process, the other couple of realities for me are that, in this proposal of a 6 through 8 school, you're providing a dramatically improved experience for 25% of our student body in the Cheshire Public Schools, with 3 grades, 6, 7, 8. This other proposal, frankly, creates a little bit more disruption. You do get 25% of the kids, perhaps, in a new elementary school, but it's really a select group of neighborhoods that receive the benefit. If we have a 6 through 8 school, 100% of Cheshire neighborhoods benefit from that investment. And so everybody's child, regardless of where you live in our community, will benefit from that investment. I think, from a sales perspective, that could be very important to the community. And it does allow us to pull things out, to breathe. You're not in that scenario either. A new 6 through 8 middle school, you're no longer talking about redistricting in the near future, which is certainly another area that creates a lot of consternation in the community. I just think it's easier. It's more beneficial for all of a great percentage of our kids, and it's easier to sell, aside from the larger price tag than to build a new elementary school. So, I mean, this is by no means a magic bullet. It's just a different perspective that I keep coming back to.
Those are great points, Jeff, by the way.
The primary
talking about the holistic benefit.
The primary concerns I was, enrollment forecast, a 6 through 8 middle school addresses that need, because you're pulling 6th graders out of the existing schools. HVAC and indoor air quality are an issue across the district. Clearly, we're not going to update every single building, new HVAC systems, but I can provide a new HVAC system for 25% of our kids by building a 6 through 8 middle school. School security, I can address that again for 25% of our kids with a 6 through 8 school. ADA compliance, I can provide again for 25% of our kids. Address the traffic issues, storage, overall facility feel. Everything gets addressed for a large chunk of kids for every neighborhood in Cheshire. Aside from building a brand new high school, you know, a high school would serve a greater population of every neighborhood, but it doesn't address the overcrowding issue that we'll face in the elementary schools. So I, you know, just looked at the various scenarios, and it's kind of what I was thinking. I'll email it to you. I won't be at tonight's meeting because I'm doing the Cheshire Cast recording, but I'll probably be joining late. But it's something that I've been thinking about. It's only one perspective. Obviously not the right perspective. It's just a perspective.
Yeah, Jeff, were you in that one? Would we still consider taking Chapman offline and moving it to Dodd and just doing the best we can with Dodd, given its site parameters? Or
Well, you know, that's certainly a consideration. I didn't book on that. I don't know that that's terribly beneficial. And it's something that could be resolved several years out. Dodd as a facility isn't that much better than you know, because it's a middle school facility. Really, you'd have to retro that to make it a better elementary. I just don't think it makes a lot of sense to invest more money in Dodd to be an elementary school if that's not going to be the long range purpose of it. I think you could probably save your money there, at least move Humiston Board of Ed and the alternative high school there, close this building, either repurpose or whatever the town would like to do with it. You know, I don't think you're going to have enough space just by moving 6th out to put Chapman into another building without a significant decline in enrollment that we don't foresee.
Right.
But so I think you probably keep Chapman as is, put everybody, you know, the 6 through 8 in a new school, and then start to, again, reevaluate what does our enrollment look like? What do we need to do to tackle the elementary facilities or the high school based on what the priorities are at that time? But I can send it to Arnett here momentarily, but I probably won't have it ready for this meeting because Vin was double checking some things on the document for me.
so Chuck and Renee committee, this is definitely a new, I'll say, twist on the new middle school. Certainly something I think we should share, depending on when Jeff gets there. You know, with the committee, I assume.
Sorry, I was on mute. Yeah, I think that we should. I'm glad we're having this discussion first. So thank you so much, Jeff. And those are all great points. I'm particularly touched by the fact that it actually affects the most students, not only from a population standpoint, but also if you factor in the students in time, it affects more than doing the elementary school. So that makes sense to me. So for example, the kids that are in elementary now, the parents of those kids will be excited about this middle school of supporting the project now because their kids will be the first ones to take advantage of it. I just don't want to, and this is up for discussion, but I don't necessarily want to add another option. I wonder if this is just a refinement of the middle school.
Refinement option. Of 2A. Be a refinement of 2A. Yep.
Right. I don't necessarily want to introduce a new option. Right. I think we twisted a little bit, and we still, and I think its first name still remains, which is the middle school option, and we just work to make it more efficient.
So I don't know if Mike or Rebecca, if we could maybe just tweak on the first, if everybody's in agreement, maybe just tweak in the first slide we can maybe take the X off and then just put, new 6-8. And then, Dodd to host central office, alternative high school, something along those lines. Chapman to remain at Chapman. And I guess with Darcy stay at Darcy, Darcy pre-K would go to Highland.
Correct.
Is an option. Yep.
I mean, that's just in what I was thinking. And you guys could tell me better, certainly Rebecca, from the enrollment perspective, is that far-fetched or not? The idea that we could transition that program. Birth to 3, you're not talking about real classrooms necessarily. So I think it's feasible, but I don't know as well as you probably do about the numbers. Future.
Yeah. And Jeff, just to say, if say we couldn't get the entirety of the Darcy program in Highland, what if the K program went there, and what if the pre-K somehow went to Dodd?
Yeah, I kind of need the pre-K through K.
You need them together.
Yeah.
So to say we needed a little space, then if maybe down the road there was a redistricting that allowed for that all to happen, but done in a much less of an intensive scale than what we've been showing.
Yeah.
That, you know what I mean? Just to use the space that's available at the elementaries then.
Yeah. You're saying, I don't know that we would need wholesale redistricting to accomplish that goal. It would be much more nuanced than some of the stuff we've seen. Not that it wouldn't impact anyone, but you're talking about significantly less individuals and families than wholesale redistricting.
And I'm thinking
and those programs, for example, the programs at Darcy, everybody from town goes to Darcy. So like my son goes to Darcy, right? So we have to already go to Darcy from wherever in town it is that you live in to attend those programs. So wherever they're in, I don't think that's, I don't even think if you could call that redistricting, moving pre-K and K. I mean, because they're staying at a location anyway.
Yeah,
it may be that some other redistricting needs to happen so that Highland can accommodate that pre-K though.
Yeah, right. And Rebecca, what I'm kind of thinking too is if we have the lead time with the middle school construction project and the larger reorganization, I'm wondering if you can't have sort of like a phase area where all the kids in these areas finish out where they're at, and then any new kids coming in, they would then phase into the new path or the new redistricted pathway. So like nobody actually moves, but you just over time you change that pathway. You change those boundaries.
So any new kids that come in go to the school.
Right.
Yeah, a suggestion like that is clearly much more palatable to the people that are currently making the decision as to whether or not we're going to invest in the community and the school system.
Yeah, agreed. But I think with having the way we're kind of talking about setting it up, and having years at to our advantage, you're able to do something like that.
Right.
I don't think my transportation coordinator is going to be happy about that, but
the only person not happy, I mean, come on. I mean, but yeah, that's always the person who's not happy with that.
And just to be sure we're all on the same page. So in this scenario, Doolittle's kindergarten students would go back to Doolittle.
Right.
And you'll have the Highland kindergarten students there with the, the pre-K and the birth to 3 program. Right. Okay.
Yeah, I think we looked at it, and I think I deleted my file, but I think when we were looking at it at a rough high level of taking 6 out, it brought I know from the space standard waivers for looking at the enrollments, and again, we'll have Malone do them, but it was bringing them all into that low 90s to mid 90s waiver, which is for the state looking at to be right sized. When you look at the projection versus what you have available for space, it's not to say we wouldn't need maybe a classroom or 2 here or there on a needs basis, but definitely closer to, I'll say, the right sizing where you don't need space. It's below 100, which means you theoretically have enough space. And then I think it comes down to programming of the schools where I think we all admit that when a school has more room, they're going to find a way to use it, regardless if it's a good way to use it. That's another discussion versus reprogramming and tightening that programming up.
Mm-hmm.
Rebecca, do you run into, are you going to talk cost of the new elementary school?
That's our realm. That's where we get into that.
Oh, Charles.
Andrew. I can give you ranges, and this is where we get delicate here. I don't know if Rebecca or Mike, if you guys had anything else on your end. At a high level, is it fair to say? I mean, the elephant in the room is that really is the high school, right? It's a huge building. To suggest that being whether even a new or a renovation as a project to initiate your program, frankly, it puts a huge burden on you financially. We looked at, and I'll share those renovation ranges with you, but you're in the hundreds of millions. I mean, you're under 200, but you're up well above 100 million. And so to put that stress ahead of all the other needs that you have in your district doesn't seem to be one of, listening to the town council, financially prudent per se. But I'll share those numbers, but is that a fair aspect to look at the high school, that is that model to start with first isn't as appealing?
I mean, the one thing I was going to say, sorry, Renee, is if you tackle the high school first, what are you doing about fixing your capacity for your elementary? I don't think there's even a question of what the priority is. Even if the desire is to have an improved high school, you have to deal with the capacity issues first.
Agreed, and that's where we're kind of at, but that's not our decision to make as your consultants. We need to get, hopefully tonight, maybe the committee, I think we had to have a frank discussion about it. Go, listen, it's not affecting the data-driven criteria that we've been talking about and the data that Malone's, put forth. So do we just put that thing to rest? And
it's out of budget, and any project that starts out of budget, it has an uphill battle. So I think that's a reality that we need to face. Perhaps an outcome of this is that that we have an understanding of the cost. I think the town needs to plan for it, because just by doing the elementary or the middle school, the problem doesn't go away. But the reality right now, I agree with Ben and you, Chuck, is that from a capacity standpoint and a budget standpoint, that doesn't seem like the right project to start with.
yeah,
Can I weigh in? I was late arriving to the party, so I didn't hear all of your previous comments, but putting the high school project first seems to me putting the cart before the horse. I really think that the problem we have is the ever increasing space in the elementary schools and the space needs at Dodd. So if we're looking to solve the problem, we need to start there, and everything will lead us to the high school. If we have successful projects along the way, people will see the value of the changes and the realities of newer schools and remodeled schools. And then the last project should be the high school. However, as you do that, you still need to put capital monies into the high school to keep it in good shape for the ensuing years while you're doing the other projects. So you need to keep that financial piece in mind. What's the cost of keeping that high school running successfully while you're doing all the rest of them? So, but on surface, I would say that that's not the most immediate need.
that's kind of, I think, where we're landing, and it seems obvious, but sometimes what we think looks obvious from the outside isn't always the case. So we just want to be kind of open-minded about that, I guess.
Hey, Chuck. Yeah, if I could, I mean, I agree with Sylvia wholeheartedly with that. I mean, coming into this, I initially thought the high school should be the first project, but if we are going to address school modernization and we have limited dollars to work with, and we want to touch the most students and make the most improvements and make it palatable to the voters, I think we have to look at our major concern, and that is over the next 8 years, we're going to be out of room in all the elementary schools. I mean, there's no getting around that. So it's either we go to a 6 through 8 model, build a new middle school to create that space within the existing elementary schools and make that capital expenditure, or we build this new elementary school and then we still have the problem with Dodd. So it's, I think the superintendent really put it out there good to say 25% of the student body will be touched by a new middle school. And all of these issues that we're addressing, from space and ventilation and everything, that whole group will get this. And every voter, every family in town will get a benefit of a new middle school. Whereas if we build one beautiful elementary school in the northwest quadrant of the town, it's only going to be for specific neighborhoods. So selling that, I think, will be a little bit difficult. But and I keep going back every single meeting. I'm going back and forth. So yeah, so I want to hear what the pricing is for the new elementary school versus renovation or a new middle school.
Yeah, so I'll get right to it, Andrew. And we just did a high-low for a range because until we get a ed spec and a program, we don't like to dial on a specific number because, if it varies, people get married to those. We did a high-low budget for a 700 student elementary school. This is before Mike and Rebecca sent us some numbers, but obviously if we shifted and we can get closer there, I think we're pretty close. A total on a new, and what this doesn't include, and because we're recording, I want to make sure everybody listens to it. We don't have financing and bonding costs in there because we would need that from your Department of Finance. We're assuming that it'd be on town-owned property, wherever that may be. If it's not town-owned property, we'd have to add the purchasing costs to that in some way, shape, or form. So it doesn't include those specific items, just for full disclosure. For a 700 student, it's roughly around 90,000 square feet, and we're looking at between anywhere from $55 to $66 million total project cost. Now, just to give you some context of why there's that range, one is dependent upon the educational specification. The low range says we're going to build to the space standard, which says so many kids times so many square feet, multiplied by 5%, gives us a gross square foot. So that's the minimum we would build in an elementary school. We hardly ever get underneath the space standard. I know of one that we're doing now, and it's only by about 1,000 square feet. So it's right there. Typically we see, because of our specials, our special education resource rooms, our reading, math, ELL, those special programs, were never really accounted for in the state space standard. So we add on about 10% at the high end to say we think we're probably going to exceed the space standard, but we think we can justify that space to the state based upon the programmatic and educational needs for the school as a starting point. So that's where the higher end comes in. Variations in cost per square foot, we range from $350 a square foot up to $365 a square foot, which is, for the building alone, is the max that the state will allow us. It assumes a range of site costs anywhere from 15 to roughly 22 to 25% of the building costs, and that's based upon some historic data. Again, we don't have a site, we don't know specifically. We haven't done any geotechnical studies, environmental site assessments. That would be the next phase in our pre-referendum phase 3. So between 55 to 66 on a new school being, I think, 37 and change, Vin, if we got our numbers right for the, I think it's 35.72 for a new reimbursement.
Right, that's the reimbursement rate you're talking, Chuck, right?
Correct, yes, 35.72 in a reimbursement rate for a new. We assume about 7.5% ineligible costs. There's always ineligible in every project, and for some of the newer ones, that's what we saw. The Orchard Hill Elementary School, I think, was 7.65 at the end of the day. So we said about 7.5%, and that's subject to audit for that. And assuming we have a space standard waiver. If we go above the space standard, this assumes that the state would allow us to build to that and keep it at 100% reimbursement. If we built above and they didn't give it to us, that 35.72 would be reduced by a ratio. Not too much, probably a few points, but again, a caveat. So the estimated district share would be about 37 to 45 million on a high-low, and the state reimbursement would be basically 18 to 22 million, the remaining balance there. So to the town, you're 37 to 45 million, again, depending on the size of the building and reimbursement. Sylvia, you're on mute, Sylvia.
One of the things you slid in there was, that was for the building only. So now we have to fit the building out with all sorts of electronics and furniture. And
This would include everything, Sylvia.
This
Yeah,
includes
I do apologize.
okay,
kind of go on a high level for the sake of our time. So that would include construction costs,
okay,
building and site. It would include FF&E, all your furniture, fixtures, equipment. Yeah. It include architecture, all your fees and expenses for architect's fees, CM, OPM, testing fees. The only thing it doesn't include is those bonding fees. Thank you for the question, but it does include the entire project cost. And I can give you a quick a snapshot, of that. And
that's not so critical. It's just, I was
Okay.
concerned that all of that was included in that number.
It is, yeah, that's a total project cost, whole kit and caboodle to
Okay.
give you a new school. It includes moving costs to move the contents from Dodd over to that, school as well. But yeah, that includes everything with the exception of the few that I mentioned.
Okay, thank you.
Chuck, you're talking, you meant elementary, so you want to be moving Dodd.
This is new. This would be a new elementary school,
Okay.
not a Dodd, brand new on a new site.
Yep.
Or no elementary school on a new site, roughly 700 students. So a new middle school, we roughed that out as well. That's anywhere from 110 to 140 million dollars. Again, same parameters, depends on the educational specification. We'd have to go through that, allocate a program, the low end being the space standard we had it at, we have to tweak it and coordinate with Mike and Rebecca. We used 1,172 students, but that was a 10-year because we don't know when we're going to submit the grant. But if we were to submit it soon, that would probably come down a little bit into the lower 1100s. We went 10 years out, just kind of being conservative because you are growing. And that might be a discussion we want to look at. But yeah, 110 to 140 million. Again, there's a wider range because of the size of the school and the cost per square foot we're using. For that, estimated district share would be between 75 and 90 million dollars at that 37, or 35% reimbursement rate. With, again, we assume 7.5% ineligible. So that would be your district share, 75 to roughly 90 million, and 37 to 45 million for the state share. And new school.
Chuck, did
That's
you say
almost
how many
about-
square, I'm sorry, did you say how many square feet?
You're about 100. We're saying approximately 190,000 gross square feet. Then I had estimated in our last week, and I saw my slide of 200, but 190, 200 again, depending on the program.
Okay.
Yeah, pretty good sized school, but your enrollment justifies that.
Chuck, why does it jump so much? I mean, you're talking a 700 student school to an 1100, going from, unless I wrote this wrong, going from 55 to 66 million to 110 to 140 million.
Yep.
Why would a middle school be more expensive to build? Wouldn't elementary school, because of all of the individual bathrooms and specialty spaces, be more expensive than a middle school?
You're almost half the size. You're like half the size of a new elementary school, because the square foot, the space standard. I'll apologize, I'm getting hoarse here. I'm just bringing up our district. So I'm going to share with you the space standard here, Andrew, to show you the math. Can you see that spreadsheet there?
I don't see it now.
Oh, I have to the share button might help. There we go.
There you
Sorry
go.
about that, Andrew. So this is the space standard worksheet that the state uses. And again, we're using 1172 in the calculation, whatever the 8-year high from a loan would be, but we're being a little bit conservative. We basically have to take this factor here. We're in this range here, and for grades 6, 7, and 8, we have these 148, 170, 170, and it adds these up and it divides it by the number of grades, and it gives us an average per student of 163 square feet per student multiplied by the enrollment, and that gives us 190 square feet. That's the inside face of walls. We bumped that up by 5%, so that brings us close to 200,000 square feet. It'd probably be a little bit lower based on what I'm seeing from Mike and Rebecca, on their numbers. It'd probably come down a little bit, but that's kind of why we do this range. So you can see the space standard there for the new middle school brings you close to 200 on a square foot basis. If I was to bring up the space standard for a new 700, okay, this is for a 700 student enrollment for just K to 6. Again, the numbers you can see. Now what happens is that square foot per student goes down quite drastically for an elementary school, and the average per student is 129 square feet per student versus what we just have there, 162. You're almost 30 square feet per student delta based upon the standard. Multiply that by 700, you're only at 90,000 square feet space standard. So you're 100,000 square feet more. One, we have all your cohorts from 6th, 7th, and 8th grade are, as Jeff mentioned, 25% of your population, but also greater per square foot allowance per students because of the programming in the middle school. That bumps it up more. So you're really over double of a new elementary school, and that might become a factor. But again, the pros and cons of, hey, we're affecting 25% of the entire population. I think there's a lot of strength in that argument, looking at that.
It's interesting that the cost per square foot is so much higher for the lower grades.
Well, the cost,
So much
well,
less,
it's
less.
a square foot per student. The cost per
Right.
square foot, we didn't really change, honestly, too much. I mean,
what they reimburse.
we range from 33. Yeah, it's the square foot per student is
Yep.
what they'll reimburse. The cost per square foot, they don't range too much. When you get to a high school, you're talking labs and fume hoods and more expensive spaces. But from an elementary to a middle school, they don't vary that much. I mean, classroom space is a classroom space. They're fitted with different stuff, a little bit, but not that much from what we see on that. See it. So that kind of gives a range there, and then so again, that 55 to 66 for an elementary, 110 to 140. Again, we're giving ranges until we dial in. We don't want to get too specific because if it changes. And then we just looked quickly, if there was a renovation of the high school, we're looking 150 to 190 million. Again, depending on different factors, but you're significantly higher. You have 278,000 square feet. There's a large building to renovate. We might be able to shave it down because we have that front. Vin, what was the front addition added on? Is that 2009?
No, 2000.
2000. So we're approaching that 20-year period, but that's a newer area. So maybe that cost per square foot might go down some, and we can shave it down a little bit to the center portions of the school, like the back half where the labs are at. They seem to be in decent shape. It seemed to be the middle portion, the originals, that needed more attention, the auditorium. But that's, again, a high level analysis there, just to give some context. We got about about 5 minutes left. I was just going to maybe show you the some of the maps we were talking about before that we share with Mike and Rebecca here. Just what we did, we just took a Google aerial map and we superimposed the GIS map underneath it to scale. And then the white lines, the outer white line is the approximate property line. The one interior is based upon the planning and zoning regs the way we see them. And I'd have to talk to the planning and zoning officer to confirm them, but that's what we understand to be the setback lines to be, and kind of gives us an idea of what type of room do we have. We looked at pretty much all the schools. We looked at Chapman, as you can see. You know, I think you've all been there. That property's pretty straightforward there, but we're not talking about additions there. Doolittle, this one's of interest because the parcel's large. However, if I was to show you the turn on the topography map, I can't here, but this is very hilly. This climbs up good 20 to 30, 35 feet from the back of the school up onto a hill all through here. If you look at, there's a mound in here, there's a top of a hill in here, but it all does slope up pretty sharply in the back. So that would be a cost factor. If we were to do anything back there, we'd have to deal with that topography and some earthwork. And then we had this front parcel with the ball field. There might be a little room over here, maybe some room back here, or maybe even a little bit of addition back here if we had to. But you know, when you look at it first glance, oh, it's a large parcel. But when you start adding the setbacks and looking at the geometrics of the property, it starts to get pretty small pretty quick. Not impossible, but there are some challenges. Highland, this one's interesting. The parcel itself is about 24 acres, but we do have the police station in front that's part of that parcel. It's not just the Highland proper itself. So I drew this blue line. The white line is the property. The blue line is an assumed 100-foot buffer zone. I was looking in inland wetlands and I couldn't find it easy. So I just assumed 100 where we would have to stay out of with the pond and the wetlands back here. You know, the front of the school, there's really not much there. Very limited possibilities, you know, with the loop. If we rearrange some site, we could potentially do something. You know, this is the cafeteria, so you wouldn't add classrooms here. This northern part is all paved play area, potentially. And then the only green spaces you have in the back. So it's really a matter of, hey, how much would you want to eat up of that if you were to do any additions? Again, totally up to you. But at first glance, it looks quite large. But when you really start adding the lines in, it gets a little bit tight for that. And again, we can rearrange parking and so forth, but we'd have to look at that. And then Norton is extremely tight here. The building's all up front. I think, as Ben had mentioned, you know, bus circulation, vehicular, it's all pretty much jammed up here in the front. The back parcel's got a lot of potential, but it's landlocked with residential property. So getting to it's going to be a bit tough from a logistics. Not to say it can't be done, but there isn't the rear part of the parcel the way we understand it. And it's relatively flat. It's not like Doolittle where there's a sharp topography. So, you know, we were saying if there's a 526 enrollment as is 10 years out, again, not changing anything. This doesn't account for a new middle school or new elementary school. We need about 10,000 square foot of additional space if as is. The front of the site's fully developed. There's just rear slight grades and just difficult access during construction. Again, not unsurmountable, but definitely more of a challenge for here. And then the last one is Dodd. I think we talked about this one. You know, obviously that school takes up pretty much the full width of your parcel with parking all along the west side here, with really the only developable part really pretty much in the back, and even then there's you know, traffic comes along the back and exits out off to the east here. So for a middle school, that would have some challenges associated. I think we talked about at the last meeting. So that's kind of what we looked at a very high level. We were going to share that this evening just to give committee members and the public kind of an idea from an aerial of what some of the challenges of some of these elementary school sites would be, thus supporting the idea of a new school, middle school, elementary school to help provide that relief. Any questions on anything there? Ran through that pretty quick, so I apologize.
Everybody's disheartened after that one, Chuck.
Boy, I'm a naysayer.
Yeah,
I got
Chuck, all
Nelly.
of our properties stink, huh?
Nothing's impossible, just trying to be realistic, so.
Chuck, I wanted to just add one thing for the meeting this evening is we've all talked about it here, and I think everybody kind of agrees as far as the high school options, which were presented as 3 and 4, no
Yep.
longer really look like options due to the cost, and it doesn't really address the need. But want to make sure when we present that at the meeting this evening that we get the general consensus of the full committee that we're moving off of those 2 options. And just focusing on option 1 and 2, which is, I mean, we can call them the elementary school option or the middle school option, right? As far as what we're leading with. So just want to make sure that's how we're
Yep.
planning to present it tonight and everybody's good with that.
Definitely. 100%.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Agreed.
I agree with that.
So,
I agree.
so if I had to put a, so if you had to put a bow into your previous section, Chuck, what would you say about the possibilities of expanding the current buildings?
The current elementary schools.
Yeah,
I mean, they're possible. They're possible, just they're going to require some further study and some careful evaluation of construction phasing, looking at the programmatic layout of those schools and where would any potential additions go, because we just can't look at an arrow like we're doing. We have to look at the programmatic layout of the building and see where it would be best located with respect to the existing building. And that's definitely where I would recommend the services of an architectural firm to assist us with that. That's where it kind of gets out of our wheelhouse and we kind of stay in our lane. That's where we'd want to engage a firm to help us out to evaluate that if that became the case.
Yeah, there certainly feels like that there's no low-hanging fruit, let's say, in the elementary school for expansion.
Yeah, it's not plainly obvious. Again, we can overcome any challenge if we're creative. It just there's going to be some sacrifices and some trade-offs, I think, with them, whether it's from an existing site use or from a budgetary standpoint. But again, anything's possible.
Yeah. Okay. No, it's 5 o'clock. Chuck, is there anything else pressing that you would like this subcommittee to help you with in preparation for a meeting later today?
No, I think we kind of covered, kind of an idea of what we were going to present tonight. Just wanted to make sure there wasn't any blaring red flags there. And we were just going to pop up our a milestone schedule for the pre-referendum of phase 3, just for discussion to start getting some thoughts of, okay, if an option's selected, say mid-January, what are the steps that are going to need to be taken to submit a grant application by a June 30 deadline with an assumed referendum, say November 2nd? What are the steps that we need to do? And like educational specifications, there's 3 local resolutions that need to be passed by town council. And all those, there's a timing to that. So I was hoping to walk through that tonight so we all have an understanding of what those parameters would be. Again, subject to change and subject to working with both the committee and the town staff and the Board of Ed to tweak that schedule a bit.
That sounds good to me.
All right.
So with that, then I would call to adjourn this meeting.
I think Sylvia has something she wanted to add. Renee.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's-
I'm not looking at the screen. I'm sorry.
That's
I'm
right.
You're
It's
driving, be careful.
Just
sorry.
a very fast question. The questions that I hear from people in the community are, if you are going to begin a project, whether it's junior high or elementary school, whatever you choose to do, and the remaining projects still need to be done, we're giving them eventually a sort of general timeline of how we would approach each project. Each one will follow on the next one. If we were to decide to do a DOD, what would the next school be that we would want to address, and how soon would that be? I think that's what parents are saying. We're okay with you making a decision, but my kids go to X school. When are you going to get to X school and why? Is there any general information we give them about that? In other words, we're building DOD. Can we be working on the next project preparation so that when DOD is complete, we can then follow this same path of referendum and all of that with the second project?
Sylvia, and I have to run shortly, I do apologize, but I think the next step, once we start dialing in, and I think if one of the option 1 or option 2 is selected to, hey, let's explore it further, that's when I think we start looking at, okay, what's the next step of the initial phase in evaluating, okay, say if it's a new middle school, now we got to look at, okay, what do we need to do based upon refining the numbers from alone? What does that do from the spaces for those? Then it starts turning into, I think, looking at the programs and then the physical needs of each of the schools and where should the priorities be? Should it be, if we remain at Chapman, looking at Chapman and making some upgrades there that are necessary in the mechanical spaces, and the evaluation of, is that a full-blown, say, renovation to a school, or are we doing alterations with miscellaneous capital improvement projects? That'll be part of the cash flow from the first project, and how far does that go out on the debt service? And I think that's going to really shape how much we do from those projects.
Right, and I don't want to keep you, but I think that's one of the questions that the town council will have. If we've
Certainly.
started a
No,
ball
appreciate
rolling,
it.
we need to look at the capital costs to keep those other schools running safely,
Yep.
as well as how we're going to phase in the newer portions of it. So I think that's critical in the decision that we make eventually, but so it would, let's
Agreed.
get this one decided first and then go from there. Okay,
Absolutely.
thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions from Andrew or Ben or Chuck?
I'm good, Renee. Thank you.
I'm good for tonight.
I'm good.
All right, Jeff, do you have anything you want to add?
Jeff looks like he stepped away, so he's good.
Oh, okay. So with that, we'll call to adjourn this meeting.
So moved.
Second.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Talk to you all later today.
Okay.
All
Good
right.
night.